Hello, Michael Swain here after Kansas football's 31-21 loss to Utah here inside of David Booth, Kansas Memorial Stadium. And boy, do we have a lot to talk about. And I'm going to do my best here at the start. We're going to talk about Jaylen Daniels right off the top. I'm going to do my best to thread the needle here of talking about maybe the human element of this and also just the football side of this. Man, from the human side, you feel bad for Jaylen, right? To have your college career end this way with that fourth quarter, you feel for him, and huge respect to him for showing up postgame for the postgame press conference to talk. That's something he very easily could have just said, no, I'm not doing that. And so you have to give credit to him for that. And you feel bad for him for everything that he's given, right, to KU and staying through it, the injuries and everything, right? You feel bad for him from that perspective. And on the other hand, you look at it and say, man, that cost Kansas the game. Right, the quarterback play for KU in the fourth quarter was not good enough. You're talking about a turnover when you're trying to throw the ball out of bounds. When you're in the red zone, you're close to scoring. It's a one-score game, and then your offense gets you back into position to score again, and you throw a pick six. It's just not good enough. And I think as this home stretch for Kansas has played out, Kansas has not gotten good enough quarterback play. We've talked about in these videos after the games, right? Iowa State, I think even Oklahoma State, that's a game KU posted 38 points. But if you watch that game, there were still times when Jaylen's play wasn't up to par. And over the back half of this season, you look at Kansas State, you look at Iowa State, you look today, you look at the late on against Arizona, right? No touchdowns in the second half. Like, Kansas has not gotten the play from the quarterback position that it needs to get over the hump to win that sixth game. And again, you just feel bad for him. Right, because he has done a lot for this program and has helped KU turn to be a program where, back-to-back 5 and 7 seasons is disappointing. And I think you do have to keep that context of when Jaylen Daniels showed up. Like, I'll never forget watching the Oklahoma game in 2020, right? I mean, he's 17, he's getting just killed out there on a terrible team. And you think about where things have come to now, right? You have to acknowledge that growth while at the same time saying, man, Kansas just needed better from its premier player at the quarterback position to play better. Okay, now we can talk about the game overall. Look, this is one where, KU had the game plan. It looked a little ugly, I think, early on, where Utah came into this game with an awful run defense. K-State ran for over 400 yards against them. You can look at other teams, right, in Big 12 play. They've been allowing, I think, 183 rushing yards per game if you take out the K-State game, which is the over outlier, and then the Colorado game, which is the under outlier. Okay, KU ran the ball so well today through large parts of it, 290 rushing yards. I've not had the chance to look up the most since, like, the last time KU did that, but something tells me it's been a while. And that was the game plan. And yet, on the first drive of the game, Kansas throws the ball 6 times. KU threw the ball 27 times today. 6 of them was on the first drive. And Jaylen obviously throws the first interception, which is just a bad throw and a bad read, and another one of those, like, what is happening here moments. And you could talk plenty about, hey, one-read quarterback, right? Jaylen right now to end the season.
All right, we're back. Sorry about that. My phone decided to stop working. So here we are. What were we talking about? Yes, the first drive of the game. Look, KU's game plan going into this game was pretty straightforward. Run the ball against Utah, right? KU ends up running 290 yards, and it still comes down to some of those big plays that Jaylen made, right? The first interception is one. Obviously, KU's defense then is able to get off the field on third down, forces a field goal attempt. And I think for KU defensively, if you look at this Utah team, they've had one of the best rushing offenses in the country. Their passing offense has been good. I think it's like top 35-ish in that range. And you can look at this game, and at the end of the day, KU's defense got enough stops, right? Utah's offense scored 24 points in this game, and that should be enough for you to win. And it's one of those where you compare what this Utah offense has done this season, where they're averaging over 40 points per game against Big 12 opponents. Like, that defensive performance is enough to win the game. Even if you look at the final stats and Utah gains over 400 yards, Utah is able to average 7.1 yards per play, right? You can still poke some holes in some of the defensive numbers for KU, but at the end of the day, the defense, I think, did enough for you to win the game if your quarterback does not turn the ball over 3 times. And that's what this comes down to. And we could talk again about eye discipline for KU's defense and the fact that it's so similar to the Iowa State game and the way that Iowa State really baited KU's players, especially on short yardage situations where traditionally you think, okay, the other team's going to try and run the ball. How they really draw in kind of the safeties and then they throw it over the top, right? There was one play in the first half, I think Bengala Kamara makes a great play to get back in one of those situations. But again, Utah throughout the course of this game was able to get behind KU safeties by taking advantage of poor eye discipline and then focusing too much on the line of scrimmage, and you got to go get up there and go try and stop the run, and they were too overeager, and that's how the game ends, right? At the end of the day, KU needs to get a stop there to win the game, even if, again, over the course of the game, KU did enough, I think, defensively. But still, it's still some of the same issues, right? You can look at KU's ability to cover consistently, not quite there. A couple big missed tackles led to some chunk gains for Utah. There's still some of those issues that I think you saw throughout the course of the season that again popped up here today. And so look, big picture for KU, right? It's a gut punch of a loss. You're that close to getting that win, and to not have it happen obviously stinks. And it's one of those situations where you can look at back-to-back 5-win seasons for KU and the momentum that the program seemed to have after 2023, where you go 6-6 or 6-7 in 22, you get the 9-win season in 23, and things were very much trending up. And that feels like a long time ago now. And I think so much of the last 2 years have felt like some of the same issues, where KU's inability to win close games is what's cost them. And so what is the cause of that? We've talked plenty about, right, some of the coaching decisions that can be made. I think at the end of the day, right, KU, you need your quarterback to play well in these games. And too often, this year and even last year, Jaylen Daniels did not do the job for KU. And that's just a fact. And you can equally say that at times last year, KU's defense didn't do the job. At times this year, the defense didn't do the job, right? Cincinnati, KU has the chance to get a stop. You're at 6 wins right now. If Trey Lathan catches the interception, or if guys are maybe make a tackle or two earlier in the game that don't result in big plays, we can do this game by game. But the fact of the matter is that just collectively, KU as a program has not been good enough. And that comes back to the head coach. He's making $7 million a year. His last offensive coordinator hire did not go well, Jeff Grimes. Has the defense been better than it was last year? I mean, it's one of those situations where you look at it and I'll have to dive into the numbers and kind of get through some of that stuff. But for a lot of the season, the numbers have kind of looked similar, especially as KU's kind of continued to play more Big 12 opponents, and those numbers have not been so skewed to the start of the season when you play Fresno State, a Wagner, and a West Virginia. And so look, KU, I'm interested to see if KU makes changes. We'll see. Right now, Kansas, as an athletics department, is operating at a deficit. Is there going to be money to make a coordinator change? You're talking north of $1 million for a buyout for DK McDonald, Jim Zabrowski. Is that going to happen? I don't know. And then there's the question of assistant coaches and all of that stuff. Like, I don't know what Lance Leipold's going to do. I do know that he's going to sit down and look at everything and make a decision on what he feels. And so we'll have to see what he ends up deciding to do. But it's going ahead now. You have to look at everything, right? How did KU build this roster? Is there enough maybe talent at some of the skill positions? I'd say running back, right? You're never going to replace Devin Neal. LeSean Williams was a great portal addition. He's had a really good season. But did KU get enough consistency from its wide receivers, right? The tight end depth was really tested. Bowden Gruen was a good addition. You got to look at the offensive line and the way that that's been developed. You have questions, right? You're losing your center in Bryce Foster. You're losing your right guard in Kobe Baines. You're losing your right tackle in Enrique Cruz. Do you have the talent in your program to have those players step up? Or does KU have to go into the portal and expenditure at a position that's highly valued to try and get starting level players? And that's where it comes down to. Now, this is very much a salary cap sport, right? And the salary cap is different for every team, but teams have their numbers and their budgets. And so for KU, they're going to have to operate their budget and figure out where they have to spend and where they feel good. And that's what's going to make this portal season, I think, so interesting for KU. There's going to be a first-time starting quarterback next year for Kansas, whether that's Cole Ballard, Isaiah Marshall, David McComb. Jalen Mason's probably not going to be a fixture in that as a true freshman. But look, there's going to be a first-time start regardless. How do you build a roster around them to protect them through what will be an up and down season. Because I don't think it's fair to expect a first-year starter to show up and all of a sudden be, incredible. There's going to be ups and downs. So how do you build a roster around that person? That's going to be really important. And defensively, it comes down to, is DK McDonald back? And if he is back, then you're changing the way that you're recruiting, because he wants to do a little bit more of kind of the 3-down stuff. And I think it's very interesting that today you saw KU do a lot more of that 4-2-5 look. And I am of the opinion that over the last couple weeks, KU went 4-2-5 against Arizona, one of the better defensive performances KU's had. Today, KU went 4-2-5. Yeah, there are some issues, definitely, but KU got some stops against Utah. And so there's still a question of, hey, what is KU's base scheme going to be and how do they recruit to that? And then, of course, you got to retain your players, right? That's a big part of this now, too. Other teams are going to look at KU's roster and say, a team in the Big Two could say, hey, I like player X and player Y. Let's go talk to their agent and see if we can get them in the portal. So, look, this is a huge offseason for Kansas. That's going to set up a very interesting campaign next year. And the question comes back to, how exactly is Kansas going to go about and build this and change things, right? Because you can't, and they're not going to be the same, right? Your quarterback's not going to be the same. That's such an important position. You're going to lose some players on both sides of the ball. It's not going to be cookie cutter the same. But I want to see how the approach and see if the approach changes, because that's going to determine a lot. So look, that's a little bit of rambling about the big picture of things. But right now, KU's going into next year with Lance Leipold as head coach. They have, they've got some good players on the roster. You've just got to get the right guys around them to maximize the talent. And then coaching-wise, I think Leipold's got to look at things, and I think he'd admit this too, and he did. He said he's not been good enough. And he'll go back and look over the course of the season at some of the stuff. And so do we see an approach change where maybe it's maybe a little more front-footed and aggressive like you've seen some other coaches be in the Big 12? I don't know. But shaping up to be a huge offseason after a really, I think, disappointing campaign and back-to-back disappointing campaigns. And like I said off the top, keeping the context, right, of what Kansas football was and how the expectations have been reset to what they are now, right? That's one thing. But then now you have to live up to those expectations as you are committing to the football program being competent and being competitive in the Big 12, right? Because the Big 12 is going to be, I think, very similar in years to come. A lot of one-score games, and it's going to be coming down to coaching decisions and if you can really operate in the margins. And so that's where Kansas football has to take the biggest step forward. So look, those are my big picture thoughts kind of right here. A little disjointed with doing 2 takes, but it is what it is. I want to say this though. Thanks so much for watching these videos. Like and subscribing to the channel. It's been fun to watch the channel grow and all of this. It's been a very interesting season, even if it's one that maybe I wasn't expecting going into the year. Maybe you weren't either. But it's been a fun ride. Thanks for being a part of it. Make sure you stay tuned to Fog.net. We got you covered with all sorts of coverage. I've been looking at some of the stuff we got planned for the next couple weeks. And so a lot of big picture thoughts and analysis for our VIP subscribers, especially if you aren't a VIP subscriber, you can join right now. 75% off, $2.50 a month for the next 12 months. You get all the transfer portal coverage, basketball recruiting, fall camp next year, all the way through next season. So look, it's a busy time. We're always working hard. We're trying to give our subscribers the best content possible. So make sure you check out that deal as well. Thanks so much for watching. Hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving. We'll talk to you all soon.